In this video, I'll be going over everything you need to know about Pokemon natures and how they work in the new Pokemon Scarlet and Violet games. I'm going to keep it as simple but as detailed as possible. Now, if you enjoy Pokemon gaming content, honestly, I would really love and appreciate if you would subscribe to my channel. It would really mean a lot to me. Having said that, let's get straight into it. So, first question, what are Pokemon natures? Now, natures were introduced in Generation 3 with Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire and are essentially a superficial personality for your Pokemon. They are randomly generated by the game when you catch a Pokemon in the wild, when you hatch a Pokemon from an egg, when it is gifted to you by an NPC, or when it is traded over to you by an NPC. There are 25 different natures, and lastly, you can check a Pokemon's nature by clicking on check summary and hitting the D-pad twice to the right, and there you will have it. It says the nature of the Pokemon, and I think that's everything we need to know about the first question. So let's ask another question. How do natures work in the context of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet? The way that natures work is simple. They increase one stat by 10%, but they decrease another stat by 10%, and it must be mentioned that they do not affect HP whatsoever. The way that you can check which stats have been affected by nature is by simply clicking on check summary and hitting the D-pad one space to the right. As you can see, the red arrow pointing upwards means that this stat has been increased by 10%, but the blue arrow pointing downwards means that this stat has been decreased by 1%. Now let's have a look at a natures chart. I'll leave a link in the description down below to where I got this natures chart from, because honestly I think this is the best one out there. If you have a look on the left hand side, I know it looks a bit daunting, but on the left hand side you have 25 different natures, and in subsequent columns you have increased stat and decreased stat. Let's not look at favorite flavor and dislike flavor for now, but for example, the lonely nature increases the attack by 10% but decreases a Pokemon's defense by 10%. On the other hand, you have, for example, a relaxed nature. Further down, defense has been increased by 10% but speed has been decreased by 10%. Also, there are 5 natures: hardy, docile, serious, bashful and quirky, that increase and decrease the same stat, meaning that they pretty much cancel each other out, so we call them neutral natures. Now let's use Gyarados, one of my favorite water type Pokemon of all time, as an example. Now Gyarados has got really powerful, really high attack stat, meaning that when we teach moves to our Gyarados, we're going to be purely teaching it physical moves. And we're not going to be teaching it any special moves. Therefore, we want a nature that increases its physical attack because that's what it is good at, but decreases its special attack because we're not really going to be using it. And the best nature for this obviously is going to be the adamant nature. Now there are other natures like lonely and brave and naughty even that do increase its attack, which is what Gyarados is good at, but because it decreases a stat that it's useful and needed, it's going to be basically a hindering nature. So in this case, adamant nature is the best. And I think this is everything we need to know about how natures work. Now let's ask a third question. Why are natures important in the context of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet? Now I'll be completely honest, if you're just playing the game for fun, natures really don't make much of a difference, simply because the game is fairly easy to beat without having your stats boosted. However, if you're wanting to play Pokemon competitively, or if you want to do the 6 and 7 star terror raids, then it's important for you to have the correct nature, simply because you can win or lose by fine margins, and having that 10% increase reduces that chance of you losing by a fine margin. And I think that's all we need to know about why natures are important. Let's ask a fourth question. How do we change natures of a Pokemon? The way that you can change the nature of a Pokemon is by feeding it mints. Mints were first introduced in Pokemon Sword and Shield. So let's do an example. I'm going to use this Tauros here. Let's check the summary of the Tauros. You can see that its special attack has been decreased and its speed has been increased. So it is of a jolly nature. So I'm literally just going to go into my bag and I'm going to find myself a mint. Mints are under other items. Let's have a look what mint am I gonna feed it. I'll just give it a bold mint, which is gonna increase its defense, however decrease its stats. So all I'm gonna do is literally use the item on Tauros and it'll give a message about how it's gonna affect the stats, which is absolutely fine, and it'll say that the stats have been affected. So now all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back into my Tauros, check summary, hit the D-pad, one space to the right, and now you can see that the relevant stats have been affected. Now it must be mentioned that on the nature page, the nature name doesn't actually change, okay, even though it's, the stats have been affected. However, the name of the nature hasn't changed, so that's what must be made clear. Now, where can you get mints from? So you can get mints which are found as sparkling items on the ground. You can get them from terror raids. You can also purchase them from Chansey supply stores, but only after you have defeated 6 gym leaders. You can get them from Mesagoza, Levincia, Cascarifa, Montenevera, and lastly you can get them by completing Academy Ace tournaments. I think that's all we need to know about how to change a Pokemon's nature and where to get mints from. I think the last thing is, how are natures affected by berries? Now, when we looked at the nature chart before, we saw liked flavor and disliked flavor, and I've put this image up in front of me. I'd like to thank Rdub23. He wrote this on Reddit 6 years ago. I'll leave a link in the description down below because I think the thread is quite useful, but it's just very simple. If a Pokemon of a bold, modest, calm or timid nature consumes a figgy berry, they will become confused. In the same respect, if a Pokemon of a lonely, mild, gentle or hasty nature consumes an Iapap berry, they will become confused. If a Pokemon has a berry that it likes, there is no bonus, but obviously there is a penalty if it has a berry that it dislikes. And I think that's everything we need to know about berries and how they are linked to nature. Now guys, that's pretty much it from me. Pretty long video, but I hope I've kept it simple and detailed. If you found it useful, please do share the video with as many people as you possibly can so they can understand natures and how they work in Pokemon, especially those new players playing the games and also new players wanting to play competitively. I'd like to thank you guys for taking an interest and watching my video, and hopefully I'll see you guys next time.